Kamen Rider Ex-Aid is my favorite season in Kamen Rider for so many reasons, one of which is its side content. Ex-Aid is sometimes ridiculed for having so many pieces of side content, but I love that for the most part they're all really neat additions to the season's storyline. They can fit into the continuity nicely and spice up the lore of the season, but if you don't watch it you can still understand the main show. And since most of these focus on a specific character, even before another ending, we had this collection of rider title cards and a little bit of extra depth to all the characters, which is just really fun. That's why today I'm going to be taking a look at all of these specials and ranking them from worst to best in my opinion. I actually don't know how many there are on this list. I guess we'll find out because I've left out some specials like Poppy's Room and Virtual Operations that are like basically non-canon and don't contribute anything to the Ex-Aid story. I'm sticking to like the big movies and specials and etc. You get the idea. If you like Ex-Aid, make sure you go check out my season review of the entire season. I spent a lot of time on that and I'm sure you'd enjoy it. Also go check out some of my other Kamen Rider rankings here on the channel or some of my other Kamen Rider Ex-Aid content here on the channel. Just in general, be sure to subscribe, leave a like if you're interested in that kind of content, and don't forget to let me know your favorite Ex-Aid specials down in the comment section. I guess there are 15 of these. Starting off in last place is 2017's Kamen Rider and Super Sentai crossover, Cho Superhero Taisen. This might be one of the worst tokusatsu movies I've ever watched, and it really hurts to say that. It's just really nonsensical, and not even like the standard crossover stuff like how and why Rangers and Riders share universes or fight. I can get behind that, I'm expecting that. But like, Xevious is such a strange main villain because it comes across as a generic space invasion, whereas if it was Galaxian, you could have tied into the very random gadget that appears, or the main enemy could have been the titular Cho Superhero Taisen, which is kind of what happens in the end, but it's like Cho Superhero Taisen is actually Cho Shocker Taisen, and it feels really just out of nowhere. I don't really care. Cho Superhero Taisen, the game in the movie, feels really underutilized because it's set up as this crazy tournament between teams of tokusatsu to acquire the powers of the Go Riders, but it feels tacked on somehow, mostly because the main bad guy is Xevious for some reason throughout the movie, and Cho Superhero Taisen is just a random thing that's happening, and then only a couple of the fights are part of it, and then the Go Riders are just to defeat generic spaceships just before the actual villains appear. I think it should have been the whole plot, because I really love seeing Emu pick the team, and stuff like him fighting the Amazons with a Z, and then you could have the Go Riders and some Shocker and Black Cross fusion be the final fight. That being said though, the final battles are pretty awesome, not even from a turn your brain off and enjoy the ride perspective. Tattle Fantasy versus Legacy is also a cool visual, and the Maximum Gamer's transformation to the size of a mecha, and then the fight alongside all 9 Q Ranger Robos is genuinely one of the highlights of Ex-Aid as a season. I just think the overall story is not very good, so it's in last place. The 2021 revival crossover with 01, Genmu the President, isn't really bad in my opinion, it's just kind of disappointing. I was so excited for this since it was originally an April Fool's joke a few years ago, and then it actually got made this year and was released practically on my birthday. Thanks for the presents, Toei. It was awesome to see Genmu level 2 fighting with the Gashikon Bug Visor for the first time since the beginning of the show, and then seeing it go head to head against Cronus and Kamen Rider Lazer, but then that's it. There's not really any new additions to Ex-Aid's lore, and the finale being Kuroto and Masamune awkwardly hugging and fading into a heart in the sky is so bad. I don't like it, and it's also kind of unnecessary after the Another endings. I kind of liked how they ended things off there. And then the special doesn't even have any new progress keys or gashettes. Like I wanted them to sell me a toy, but they didn't sell any toy, and it's kind of just really weird. Then it makes you question why the special even exists, and especially because this was a chance to give Bang Bang Tank a form, a jingle, and release it at long last. Who cares if it's random that Genmu is using it? But no, instead he just has Origin Action X and Zombie in his slot holders, and he doesn't even go into level X0 or level X. We could have seen level X again, but thanks for nothing, Toei. A few years ago, I did a big review on the Another Ending trilogy, and I have literally no recollection of what my review of the trilogy was in that video, other than something vaguely along the lines of me not really liking any of the movies. And now, years later, I still think Brave and Snipe is the worst one, but I actually like it more than I did originally, at least. I think Hiro's storyline in this V Cinema is really great because it's so visceral and heartbreaking. Reviving Saki provided a great way to analyze their relationship in a new way, and seeing them reconcile just before we reverted back to the status quo was just sad. I appreciate we didn't undermine either of their sacrifices in the original show. The flashbacks between the two of them are my favorite scenes in the movie. Just fleshing out the relationship makes the end hurt that much more, and there was something really cute and wholesome about seeing the two of them fall in love with each other. And then Snipe suffers from absolute character assassination. In the show, he goes on this journey about learning to open back up to the doctors thanks to Nico, but here he just attacks Hiro, he attacks Poppy, and he's like super mean to Nico too. It feels really disrespectful to how he ended his time in the show, and it also feels disrespectful to how Nico ended the show by finding this new passion to save patients as a doctor, and then she just up and leaves for Nika. Imagine if instead they recreated episode 41 when these three main characters of the movie work together, but instead we have Snipe use Nico's Bang Bang tank, Brave becomes like level 150 with 2 Gashats, and then Nico becomes a full-on rider using the Gashat Gear Duel Beta that merges their powers and brings all of these characters back together. Full Cronus Taiga was cool, but because he didn't really resolve his issues with the other two characters, the movie ends on an overall sour note. And I also hate Ren Amagazaki, and I hate that they brought him back. So, right after the Brave and Snipe movie, I have the Brave and Snipe specials. Coincidental placement, maybe, but first up is Brave's Beast Rider Squad, which is just alright. The special doesn't do anything wrong at all, it's just kind of weird. The scenes with Hiro's surgeons getting attacked makes me a little uncomfortable, but it was interesting to get actual characters and backstories for them that would feel out of place in the actual show. The Emu and Asakura scene also makes me very uncomfortable. Like, we didn't need to beat Emu into a pulp at all, especially with broken glass. Stop. It's just like the inclusion of the Legend Riders feels really awkward because, like, I assumed this was a 45th anniversary celebration. For the most part, it's just like a fun hero's daily life with the nurses and how, like, their relationship works, but we throw in, like, Legend Riders randomly, and it's like, oh, that's Kamen Rider Beast. Isn't he good? No, I guess he's evil or something. It is neat, though, how the exclusive Gashat is a safari-themed game to match how the returning riders are like the Beast Rider Squad, and it was all orchestrated by Foundation X to foreshadow their involvement in the crossover movie over a year later. Now it's time for Snipe Episode 0, and thankfully this one does not involve character assassination, it instead involves a brutal destruction of my hopes and dreams. Now what this does with Taiga's backstory is really awesome. I loved seeing wholesome, jet black hair Taiga and how he actually worked with CR for a while before Zero Day. I also enjoyed seeing his transformation into the character from the show being this real descent into madness with the proto-Gashat effects, piles of ketchup, the death of a friend, all capped up with the infamous loss of his license for just trying to do the right thing. Where it falls apart for me is how it ties into Ex-Aid overall. In the show, it's said that Zero Day was this big event, but in the special, we really just see Saki die again. And there's this weird continuity issue where the new opening uses the version from the second half of the show and seems to be intended to take place during that time frame, but then the last episode flashes through Taiga's entire story in the show, and then it's up to a post-series V Cinema to place the show back into like a continuity of some sort. And then the big fight in the past is just stuff we've already seen before. There's no proper transformation for Proto Snipe level 1 or even a big fight against Graphite. It's just none of it is there. And then of course, most infamously, this special introduces the Bang Bang Tank Gashat. It seemed like it was meant to be Snipe's equivalent to a level 4, since Brave got his level 4 in a special and Ex-Aid's level 4 debuted around the time of the announcement for this special, but it's just a finisher. It's not even trying to sell you a toy because it's been almost 5 years since this special and there's still no Bang Bang Tank Gashat in existence. Bandai, you sons of... Bringing us into the top 10 is, I think, one of the most popular Rider Summer movies, but to be honest, I don't think True Ending is all that amazing. Now, don't get me wrong, the first half of the movie is a lot of fun. The opening is really crazy, which juxtaposes so well with how cheery the VR world is, so it all adds to this bizarro element. The Creator Gamer is awesome and has honestly one of the best jingles and debuts ever. The fight scene is so good, and the music. It's a massive shame that this is the only usage of the form ever, though, and that's where my problems start. The first half just feels like a chill summer movie like Kamen Rider Ex-Aid in the virtual world of ninjas, but it's called True Ending, meant to be this big, supreme, super mega finale to the Ex-Aid storyline. So when the back half tries to do that, starts to be all serious, I feel like I'm watching two separate stories that were stapled together, and then I don't even think the back half is that good. While I appreciate giving us the full-on versus Game Diaz story that was kind of missing from the show, there's no explanation on why Game Diaz is red now and back and alive, and why it's Johnny Maxima, or how Johnny Maxima is a bugster, or how this girl was able to power him up into Game Diaz, or was he always Game Diaz and she just helped him go back to Game Diaz, or I don't... What? And then there's this weird thing where Kuroto and Parrot are absorbed in the fight against Game Diaz, and it's implied they're dead, but no, they're just gone for a bit. And since Game Diaz is beaten by Muteki, it's not a new form that defeats him, it's just the normal final form. It feels like they had that written in to prevent Muteki's transformation, but no, Emu just decided he didn't want to become Muteki in the beginning, because I guess he didn't want to end the movie quickly. At least we have Fuma, who's actually a really cool Rider villain, and I love when he shows up to see his daughter after the surgery, and the wife is like, "What the heck, honey?" And then she just pretends like he's always been there, like nothing's different. And also the final battle is just absolutely stunning. It almost makes me forget how mediocre the rest of the movie is, purely with the Hyper Muteki transformation, so let's just watch it together. Copyright strike me, Toei. I dare you. Please no. I'm just kidding. Next up is Kamen Rider Lazer's really simplistic Hyper Battle DVD that I really enjoyed. The simplicity of it is why I like it so much. There's literally no stakes. It's just Emu in Chunky Lazer level 1 going on this little adventure, fighting a fake Genmu, debuting a Proto Gashat form, and it's just fun. The new form, not the Proto Gashat form, the Hyper Battle exclusive form, is also pretty great. The combo Fukatsu Gashat is really cute, and I think that's the best description of the whole special. It's just kind of cute. That being said, it also links to the main story kind of nicely, with the whole adventure coming from Kiria's laptop that the Maxima Mighty X reprogramming came from, and then Boxo Treasure is said to be a Rider Chronicle prototype, allowing for the foreshadowing of the importance of the Proto Gashats to Rider Chronicle, and then of course Black Jacket Kiria with the Proto Gashat bike he never uses appears at the end. So it's just a pretty well-rounded special. Genmu vs. Lazer is another pretty simplistic movie. It's pretty much just about the titular fight, but that allows for some really interesting storytelling to shine through. It's a really neat idea to end the main Ex-Aid chronology with the rivalry that defined so much of the season. It was constantly brought up in the show that Kuroto was not redeemed, and this is the final implementation of that idea, finally allowing him to step back into the spotlight as the true villain. I don't know why the other characters forgot that they didn't trust him as a character. Like, Hiro was like, "What? He was the villain the whole time?" Yes, Hiro, there is a reason you kept him in a little digital prison. Anyways, I really like the implication that Zombie Chronicle was what Kuroto wanted his version of Kamen Rider Chronicle to be before it got hijacked by the Bugsters. It even does a pretty good job at fixing Snipe Episode 0's broken continuity by integrating it into this movie as part of Zombie Chronicle and actually giving it a canon spot in the timeline. Only now we just need a canon spot in the Ex-Aid toy release schedule for the Bang Bang Tank Gashat. Anyways, Masamune Cronus is another perfect perfect addition, both because of his importance in the overall trilogy, but also because he did play a somewhat important role in this rivalry as Kuroto's dad and Lazer's Bugster dad. And it was cool to see that play into his last moments on Earth by entrusting his fate to Kirya and giving him a new form. I loved that Kirya's unique backstory with Jungo was brought to the forefront as well. Jungo did die because of the Bugster virus, but he didn't actually die to the virus, so Kirya's in this weird position where he hates the virus, but he can't benefit from this game reviving people who died to the virus. And then it basically makes him a perfect opposition to Kuroto trying to revive people as Bugsters, because, you know, he doesn't like the idea of, like, reviving people as Bugsters, but he can't benefit or be persuaded by that idea itself. And then the way this caps off not only just the Another Ending trilogy, but also all of Ex-Aid is awesome. The root of all evil in Kamen Rider Ex-Aid is finally vanquished as Dan Kuroto accepts his true name and his true death, maybe, and the dangling plot thread to revive the Bugster virus victims finally gets resolved. There's also the whole moment with an empty city because of a virus, and the movie takes place in 2020. That's so fun. Yeah, I love that. No, I don't. It's really weird. Rounding out the ranking for the Another Ending movies is Paradox with Poppy. Honestly, this and Genmu vs. Lazer are basically tied for me, and I go back and forth with which one I really prefer. So the overall storyline here is really awesome, kind of dealing with these two characters' final episode sacrifices to atone for the sins of the Bugsters, and showing that they don't need to do that because Bugsters are like humans. They're their own individuals. They're not really responsible for the entire race. The villain of the movie is literally a Bugster racist, a vicious one at that. So the really big victory at the end is setting her on this redemptive arc, so it's just a really great thematic choice. But the lore of this movie, it might be weird for my favorite part of this movie to be like the lore, but ooh boy, that lore. A big chunk of the movie is just showing off a bunch of the in-series gashats as the actual games, and it beautifully adds to that world building aspect of the gashats. And it's fun to see that monk game Suguru wanted to make actually happen. It's so cool to see that Masamune's extracted Bugster virus is just another parrot, literally, because it came from the same strain that infected Emu and created the normal parrot. Parrot's level 0 restraints just being some flashing LED strips is so stupid, and it cracks me up every time. It's just flashing lights, and it's, oh my god, these restraints. Poppy gets a segment, but it was really interesting to dive into her backstory more, being Kuroto's mom, or previously being Kuroto's mom. You know, I don't know, that was like a really interesting, again, development of her story from the show. The thing that really gets me with the lore is Psycho, not that one, being the daughter of Michiko Zaizen. I hope I said that right. He certainly plays a role in Ex-Aid's lore, but he was mainly the winter crossover movie villain, and his role in that movie as Dr. Pac-Man is literally mentioned here, and the final boss suit of that movie comes back. How many crossover final bosses / monsters can you say have this much of an impact on their overall season, much less coming back in one of the final V cinemas? Exactly. So that alone, I think that's really awesome. I think Psycho should have turned into Genome's Bugster, but it's fine. This is good enough. Oh, and Kuroto has one last hurrah as the meme lord before he becomes a final boss again. Actually, no. He gets two last final hurrahs, and one of them is, yeah, it's the one where he's butt-ass naked. These next two specials on the list are both really simplistic, but something about that simplicity lets them really stand out as some of the best Ex-Aid side content. First up is the Tricks Paradox special. This story makes the most of its placement in the timeline, in my opinion, since it comes after the show ends, and it really emphasizes how Parrot's on this new mission to find redemption. In his puzzle room, he reflects on how he and Emu fought against each other, but now they just get to fight alongside each other, and he personally thanks Emu for this just before their fight together as well. It's also really fun to see the two halves of the genius gamer M put their brains together in a non-fight simulation, a puzzle actually, with the return of the other crossover monsters. This one isn't as big a deal to me because it is just like a suit and it has returned before, but it's still pretty cool. But what makes this special really awesome for me is that it not only plays with the overall story of Ex-Aid, but also provides for the story of Ex-Aid by functioning as the inciting event of the Another Ending trilogy, turning this fun little side quest into a trick by Kuroda to release him from his prison. It's just one extra layer of depth to Kuroda as a villain, but also to a special that already works pretty well as a fun little side quest. Moving on to number 5. Actually, before I just want to talk about how this whole thing is filmed in the same location the sort of logo spaces were filmed at in Kamen Rider Saber. I just think that's fun. That's it. Okay, actually bringing us into the top 5 is the Genmu Trick Special. Once again, this takes full advantage of its placement in the continuity by functioning as the sequel of sorts to Heisei Generations. I love seeing Kuroda in his prime as the master programmer manipulator by creating games based on the Legend Riders after having just interacted with a whole team of them. And then the whole thing is, like, again, another one of his ploys to see how far can his technology be taken by people who don't know they're in a test to see how far they can take it. Additionally, we get a bunch of games based on real-world Bandai Namco games as an evolution of Pac-Man existing in this world. So then everything culminates in the form of a real-world Legend Rider game with Ganba Rising. It just makes so much sense to follow up the Pac-Man crossover movie with a special utilizing the crossover and Pac-Man forms. The fights are all so much fun and are so incredibly unique, even within the world of Ex-Aid's already super unique fighting style. And a really small detail that I really love is the first appearance of Kuroda's secret base after he leaves Genmu Corp. This could have just been a one-off location that we never see again, but making it this location that comes into play later on just adds to the idea of Kuroda as a mastermind who's been planning everything, even this backup base. So as a Kamen Rider Genmu special, even though he's not in it that much, it definitely adds to the Kamen Rider Genmu character. Kamen Sentai Go Rider is such a weird inclusion to Ex-Aid's roster of extra content. As a follow-up to Cho Superhero Tyson, it doesn't really have anything to do with Cho Superhero Tyson. The inclusion of the Go Rider powers is so wildly unnecessary because Emu quite literally pulls them out of his back pocket, and there's no Sentai involvement for the Kamen Sentai, and yet, I mean, it's number 4 on my list here. The core story is just so captivating to me. I love time loop stories. I don't know, I love the idea about like the same thing being repeated in different ways. So incorporating it as a part of the Ex-Aid motifs as this unbeatable game is beautiful. It also adds to the lore. Again, I keep talking about this lore as another one of Kuroda's secret plans, this time as a failsafe in case of death. I guess it's also the sequel to the Genmu special because of the Legend Riders. I guess this is what we can assume he was, like, what he did with that Legend Rider data, so that's also kind of awesome. I think that the cast of characters is really intriguing, especially with the through line that they're all dead. Bringing back Kiria just makes so much sense, and saving him for last as that reveal to Emu that everyone is dead creates a huge oh crap moment, and it's just expert storytelling. Seeing these ghosts reject their opportunity to return to life and instead heroically sacrifice themselves, continue to have their sacrifice themselves, for those that have a life, is the exact message this special should be telling, and it does so expertly. Again, this is probably the weirdest piece of the Kamen Rider Ex-Aid story, but somehow I just think it all works, and I think Totema Genmu is a good suit, and I think Maximum Gamer Level 99 is the 6th Ranger of the Go Riders and the Robo, and you can fight me on that. I usually don't watch final stages for tokusatsu. I just feel like since they're not really canon, and because of how they're presented, they feel a bit cheaper than other parts of a season and not really worth my time. But bringing us into the top 3 is the promised Doremifa beat Kamen Rider Ex-Aid's final stage event. I watched this literally for the first time for this video, and my god, it's amazing. It's pretty much everything I could have asked for in a post-season Ex-Aid storyline. One big thing for me is that Game Diaz is actually awesome here. Game Diaz plays into the idea of bugsters having hearts, as he now has a heart, but it's filled with malice for the Kamen Riders that defeated him, resulting in him brainwashing his fellow bugsters to fulfill his mission. But in a really wholesome moment, we see that the bugsters we've been fighting for so long actually enjoy playing with their Kamen Rider rivals, so they break free from Game Diaz, and he's just like, oh, I mean, I guess that's what a heart is, huh? So it also ties really well into the main Emu Poppy storyline. The whole story here really builds off of their promise to play Do Re Mi Fa Beat together. So there's already an emotional weight to everything, and it just gets built onto when Poppy is brainwashed into the stage show aspects of this are also really fun, like Kuroto being the first cast member we see in a while, as he's like that, and then Kuroto yelling at the audience to bring Poppy's name to bring her back. Kirya starts in the audience because he's a fan favorite, and then he mocks Kuroto for the audience. And then, are these two self-aware? Are they aware, like, in Ex-Aid they're in a show? But then there are so many amazing little details that just turn this into my favorite non-crossover piece of Ex-Aid content. Game D is creating his own Muteki Gamer copy after being beaten by Muteki Gamer is really great, even if it's just a lifeless shell. 2 Muteki Gamers, what's there to hate? Look, three of them. I'm just kidding. I'm non-canon. Or am I? Whoa. It's really fun to hear all the insert themes play alongside their matching forms, including the unused level 2 insert. Getting to see more of the underused Kamen Rider Poppy is neat. Kamen Rider Nico Snipe just existing officially is amazing. Burgermon is a powered up boy at long last. And then the all rider henshin, including Cronus Taiga and Graphite as a pseudo rider, followed by everyone saying their catchphrases as an instrumental of Ex-Aid plays. Literally peak Kamen Rider Ex-Aid, and it's in a stage show. If this exact storyline remained and it was just turned into a movie or like a mini series or whatever, it would probably be at the top spot. But because of the limitations of a stage show budget, I mean, it's not bad. It still gets to be in the top 3. In second place is Ex-Aid's first crossover movie, Heisei Generations, just Heisei Generations. And by crossover, of course, I'm referring to the crossover between Ex-Aid's fake video games and the real world video game Pac-Man. Just the novelty of having arguably the most popular and culturally impactful video game character of all time, not only as a part of Ex-Aid's lore, but also the driving force of this movie, is really cool. It's integrated in a really fun way because on first glance it just seems like a marketing ploy, like, oh look, it's Pac-Man in our big movie, please watch our movie. Even Zaizen as Dr. Pac-Man just like tosses his mask aside, like after they reveal his identity. I assume he just wanted to wear a Pac-Man mask and do some minor trailer fuel marketing. But then we introduced the Kamen Rider crossover elements, and man, how the hell, like, what are Pac-Man's notorious enemies? The ghosts. And what is the season just before Ex-Aid that would have been a major part of this movie no matter what? Kamen Rider Ghost. So part of this movie revolves around how Pac-Man is weak to Takeru's abilities, and it's just a beautiful way to tie both of these crossovers together. I can't believe the universe worked out so that the video game season came after the spooky ghost season. That's gotta be like one of the greatest coincidences of all time. The recreation of the game with the whole Pac-Man dimension, with Pac-Man chasing after an Ex-Aid powered ghost and a ghost powered Ex-Aid, is so good, and it's the halfway point of the movie, because then we've got Legend Riders and some beautiful continuity. Emu and Takeru recognizing each other because of their belts that they saw in the final episode of Ghost, Takeru contacting his police officer friend Shinosuke, and Haruto and Shinosuke recognizing Gaim, is continuity win after continuity win after continuity win. And then giving each of them a stylized fight scene to match one of the bosses is just the cherry on top. The Ex-Aid season continuity is also awesome. Zaizen is a core component of Emu's infection and is frequently mentioned in in the show, but like his appearance in the show isn't really necessary, so making him this movie villain is a great way to give him some time to shine. The first appearance of Mighty Brothers Double X as a fusion of the two Mighty Action X gashettes is also really neat. This just manages to be both a fantastic Kamen Rider Ex-Aid movie, Kamen Rider crossover movie, and sequel to Pixels the movie that it gets to be in the number 2 spot. Coming in at first place as my favorite of Ex-Aid's extra content is Heisei Generations Final. So an instant point to this movie is how Build and company are the co-stars. Build is one of my favorite Rider seasons, Build's cast is one of my favorite Rider casts, so combining it with Ex-Aid is just a recipe for perfection. The interactions between them are amazing, especially with Parrot and Sento. The parallel world concept is really interesting because it helps explain Build's unique identity as a season, but also makes the antagonists really interesting. It's literally the same dude twice. In one dimension, he fits the lore of Build as a Build driver scientist that turned bitter and created dimensional travel, and in another, he fits into the world of Ex-Aid as a really insane scientist. It's more that he fits into the overall Rider lore of that universe by featuring the return of Foundation X after being teased in the Brave special. So then that constitutes such a natural return for the other Rider crossovers, with Force A and O's having both dealt with Foundation X in their own crossover movies. Since Gaim and Ghost were both in the previous movie, their inclusion just automatically fits in well. The movie also really utilizes all of these returning legends by creating this core storyline of Banjo learning what it means to be a Kamen Rider, and it's just a great way for him to see all the different ways a person can be a Kamen Rider and become more worthy of the armor. The villains juxtapose this idea perfectly since they're pseudo-riders referred to as Kaisers, so it really emphasizes the idea of Kamen Riders as symbols of love and peace, almost as a tribute. Combined with all of the different forms and action courtesy of the Legend Riders, this is such a beautiful tribute to Kamen Rider, and that's not even counting my favorite part, which is how it ties into Kamen Rider Ex-Aid. This movie is somehow the finale to a storyline that began in the Ex-Aid season. So the finale of Ex-Aid features Build cameoing to take Emu's powers, but accidentally has a run-in with Kuroto. Then it gets followed up with his success in the true ending post-credit scene in creating this crazy cliffhanger. So then in Heisei Generations Final, we get all the backstory for how and why this happened, plus the final resolution with Emu actually getting his powers back and like actually meeting Build. I think it's just really exciting to have this level of continuity between a show and two entirely separate movies as the build up to a big crossover event, but what's even awesomer is that the driving force of that idea is Ex-Aid's powers, and not just any Ex-Aid powers, but Muteki Gamer. It's explicitly stated by Kamen Rider Build himself that Ex-Aid's powers were stolen to safeguard the Hyper Muteki abilities until they were truly needed. So not only does my favorite form in Kamen Rider become the driving force of this movie's plot, it also just gets a really badass Henshin sequence. So yeah, for reasons similar to the season of Ex-Aid, this is not only my favorite Ex-Aid movie, but also my favorite Kamen Rider movie, for how it manages to combine these mature and childish elements in one enjoyable package for fans of Ex-Aid, Build, and the idea of a Kamen Rider. So that's my ranking for all of the Ex-Aid specials. Once again, be sure to respectfully let me know your own ranking down in the comment section, and consider becoming a patron for $2 to just get this and all of my videos earlier and in extended formats. Or just be sure to subscribe to the channel, like the video if you enjoyed it, and be sure to check out my other Ex-Aid videos, and I hope to see you next game.